Two of Hollywood's greatest legends, Clint Eastwood and Robert Redford, spent nearly 7 decades shaping cinema, but Eastwood just broke his silence at 95, and what he said about Redford shocked everyone. This is the untold story. Clint Eastwood. Today, his name means Hollywood royalty, Oscars, and box office gold. But if you think he was born for fame, you couldn't be more wrong. He grew up during the Great Depression, a time when entire families lost everything overnight. His parents were constantly packing up and moving, chasing jobs that barely paid enough to put food on the table. Clint wasn't the glamorous golden boy of Hollywood. He was the quiet kid who learned early that life doesn't hand you anything. And here's the part that most people don't know. Before anyone ever thought of him as a movie star, Eastwood was scraping by with jobs that sound more like a survival story than the beginning of a career. He worked as a lumberjack, digging his hands into rough wood just to bring home a paycheck. He stood guard as a lifeguard, fighting boredom on endless shifts, never imagining his face would one day be on theater posters. At one point, he was even a steel worker, sweating through long days that would have broken weaker men. But here's where it gets interesting. While other young guys his age were going to war or trying to climb the corporate ladder, Clint started developing an odd fascination with performance. Not acting schools, not stage training, just this raw, magnetic energy that people couldn't quite explain. His friends said there was something different about the way he carried himself. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people paid attention. That silence, that stare, it was unsettling. And that became his weapon, a weapon Hollywood had never seen before. Want to support our channel? Join the Echo Insider. Just hover over the Echo Insider icon, click and watch new videos before anyone else. Clint's first break wasn't flashy. He landed a role on Rawhide, a TV Western in the late 1950s. The show gave him steady work, but nothing about it screamed superstar. If you watched him then, you probably wouldn't have guessed he'd one day reinvent the entire Western genre. But then came the scandalous twist that changed everything. Hollywood didn't make Clint Eastwood a star, Italy did. In the 1960s, when his American career was stalling, he took a risk that most actors would have laughed at. He flew overseas to work with the then unknown Italian director, Sergio Leone. The pay was low, the project sounded like a gamble, and critics back home mocked the idea of spaghetti westerns. But when A Fistful of Dollars hit theaters in 1964, audiences saw something they had never seen before. Clint didn't play the loud cowboy. He wasn't John Wayne giving long speeches about justice. Instead, he played a stranger with no name, a man who barely spoke at all. He squinted, he smoked, he stared down enemies with silence so heavy it made the audience sweat. And the shocking thing, people couldn't look away. Movie after movie followed. For a few dollars more, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Each one pushed Clint further into legend. Suddenly he wasn't just an actor, he was a new kind of hero. Ruthless, cold, impossible to predict. He blurred the line between good guy and villain, making the audience question, do I root for him or fear him? Meanwhile, back in the States, another star was rising, Robert Redford. And while Clint was building his legend in Europe, Redford was being polished into Hollywood's golden boy. Two men, opposite in style, rising at the same time. One was grit, silence, and danger. The other was charm, warmth, and all-American beauty. And this silent competition was only just beginning. By the early 1970s, Clint Eastwood had already become the mysterious cowboy who redefined the Western, but just when people thought they had him figured out, he shocked the world with a role that was even more dangerous, more controversial, and more unforgettable: Dirty Harry. When the movie hit theaters in 1971, it didn't just entertain audiences, it divided the country. Clint Eastwood stepped into the shoes of Inspector Harry Callahan, a San Francisco cop who didn't play by the rules. He was blunt, ruthless. He carried a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and he didn't hesitate to use it. And then came that line: "You've got to ask yourself one question. Do you feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk?" It was more than a quote. It became a cultural explosion. People shouted it in bars, repeated it on TV, and decades later, it's still one of the most iconic lines in film history. But here's what made it so scandalous. Harry Callahan wasn't a clean-cut hero. He wasn't Redford's smiling golden boy. He was violent, brutal, and some said flat-out dangerous. Critics called the movie fascist. They claimed Eastwood's character glorified police brutality at a time when America was already boiling over with protests, crime, and political unrest. Some hated him for it, others loved him even more. But either way, Clint Eastwood had done it again. He forced people to look, to choose, to take a side. Meanwhile, Robert Redford was skyrocketing with a very different image. Films like Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid and The Sting made him America's golden gentleman, the charming outlaw, the smooth con artist, the man you couldn't help but love. So now, Hollywood had two extremes. Redford, the polished heartthrob, easy on the eyes and smooth in delivery. Eastwood, the stone-faced gunslinger turned ruthless cop, willing to break every rule. It was a clash of archetypes, two different visions of masculinity battling for the hearts of audiences, and fans couldn't stop asking themselves one question: what would happen if these two legends ever stood side by side? While the world debated Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood was already plotting his next move, and it wasn't what anyone expected. Because unlike most actors who were content with fame, Clint wanted something bigger: control. Hollywood at the time was run by big studios and powerful producers. They told actors what to do, what roles to play, and how to play them. But Clint Eastwood wasn't built to follow orders. So, in true outlaw fashion, he created his own production company, Malpaso Productions. That one move gave him something rare in Hollywood: freedom. And with that freedom, he did something even more shocking. He stepped behind the camera. Most actors who tried directing were laughed off as amateurs. But Eastwood proved them all wrong. His very first directing effort, Play Misty for Me in 1971, was a tense thriller that critics praised for its suspense and sharp storytelling. This wasn't just an actor dabbling in directing, this was a filmmaker in the making. Over the years, Eastwood's style became his signature: fast, efficient, and stripped down. No wasted shots, no unnecessary fluff, just raw storytelling that hit audiences in the gut. And then came his masterpiece, Unforgiven, in 1992. It wasn't just another Western, it was a funeral for the Western genre itself. Dark, brutal, and filled with moral questions, it tore apart the myth of the heroic cowboy. The Academy took notice, handing Clint the Oscar for Best Director and Best Picture, but he wasn't done. Mystic River, Million Dollar Baby, Letters from Iwo Jima, American Sniper, Sully. Every decade, he reinvented himself, proving he wasn't just a movie star, he was one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history. And while Eastwood was rewriting the rules of mainstream cinema, Robert Redford was building his own empire in a completely different way. He founded the Sundance Institute and Film Festival, creating a platform where unknown independent filmmakers could launch their careers. Without Redford, names like Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, or Kevin Smith might never have found their audience. So think about this. While Clint Eastwood was crafting hard-hitting blockbusters that shook audiences, Robert Redford was opening the doors for the next generation of storytellers, two men, two paths, both rewriting Hollywood in their own image. And yet, despite their influence, despite their parallel careers, they never shared the screen.
For decades, Clint Eastwood built his reputation on screen as the man who never flinched, never broke, never lost control. But behind closed doors, his personal life was anything but steady. It started simple enough. Clint married Maggie Johnson in 1953, long before he became a household name. She was beautiful, elegant, and by all appearances the perfect Hollywood wife. But as Clint's fame grew, so did his temptations. And soon, his marriage began to unravel under the weight of secrets. While still married, Clint began an affair with actress and dancer Roxanne Tunis. This wasn't just a fling. It was a long-term relationship that produced a daughter, Kimber, in 1964. But here's the shocking part. Eastwood didn't publicly acknowledge Kimber for years. To the outside world, he was still the clean family man, married to Maggie. To insiders, he was already living a double life. But Roxanne wasn't the end of it. In 1975, Clint entered into a 14-year relationship with actress Sandra Locke. Together they made films like The Outlaw Josie Wales and Sudden Impact, and on screen, they looked like the perfect Hollywood couple. Off screen, it was chaos. Locke later revealed that while she was living with Clint, he was carrying on multiple affairs, fathering children with other women at the same time. Their breakup in 1989 exploded into lawsuits and public battles, exposing Eastwood's tangled personal life in headlines that shocked fans. And it didn't stop there. Another secret relationship, this time with flight attendant Jocelyn Reeves, produced two more children, Scott, who would later follow in Clint's footsteps as an actor, and Catherine. Again, these children lived in the shadows of Clint's carefully crafted public image until years later when he finally acknowledged them. Then came Frances Fisher, another actress, another romance, and another child, Francesca, born in 1993. By this point, Clint's family tree was sprawling, complicated, and filled with stories Hollywood magazines could only dream of. And here's the thing, audiences never stopped watching. If anything, the scandals made him more magnetic. He wasn't polished like Redford, he was unpredictable, flawed, even reckless, and that made him fascinating. Because people couldn't tell where Clint Eastwood the man ended, and Clint Eastwood the legend began. But while his personal life kept tabloids busy, fans were still asking one burning question. Why didn't the two greatest icons of their era, Eastwood and Redford, ever join forces on screen? At 95, Clint Eastwood's words carried the weight of a lifetime. Robert carried himself with grace. Hollywood isn't an easy place to keep your dignity. He managed it. We didn't need to compete. We both found our way, and the movies are better because of it. In an industry built on rivalry, two icons chose respect. And in the end, that respect may be their greatest legacy. If you enjoyed this story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really makes us smile. And if you're hungry for more fascinating tales, check out the two videos right below. You might just discover your next favorite story.